This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers podcast.
With Tony Brueski.
We're talking with Eric Bland. He's attorney for the family of Stephen Smith. It's been a lot of drama in the South Carolina Low Country, obviously, throughout this year. Murdaugh now behind bars. The Murdaughs, that whole thing is kind of lifted, and there's a feeling of, oh, maybe we can talk a little bit more. My question would be, if the Murdaughs had nothing to do with it and had no knowledge of anything with this, why would, even if they still had a hold in the community, have any sort of restriction or hold anyone back from speaking about this or trying to find justice for Stephen, assuming that the Murdaughs really, it wasn't part of the things that they were involved in, so there's nothing that they would want to be covering up, essentially.
Well, I think in that county you have two factions.
Okay.
Or maybe let's say three. You have the old guard that benefited along with Murdaugh on how the power was basically placed and utilized by a small group of people in that county.
Okay.
And so they wanted to stay the same. They had access to judges. They had access to politicians. If you watch some of the documentaries, there's a lot of people who were very loyal to Alex. So you have that faction of people that don't want the power to be shifted, don't want it to be spread out, like that it was concentrated into a few people. So that's a good significant portion, probably about 25, 30%.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have 30% that are kind of mad. They like a quiet lifestyle,
mm-hmm.
and they didn't like the dissension, the number of media that descended on Hampton County and the focus that's been placed on Hampton County by the media and by me and by some of the others. My podcast partner,
sure.
Mandy Matney, and Mike DeWitt, the local newspaper editor there, by the state paper, by the Post and Courier, and certainly by all the national
all of us
publications.
yeah, we
so
certainly
they like their little idyllic small southern town. They like the quiet, and they don't like the focus that or the narrative. Let's say the narrative that has been trafficked about Hampton County, although true,
mm-hmm.
They don't like it, and they want things to just settle down. They want the media to leave. They want all these trials to be over with. They want me to stop talking about it on my podcast or when I go on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's another third who were shut out of the system. Either were victimized by the Murdaughs or exploited by the Murdaughs or Alex, or felt that they didn't get a just result by their law firm, or were scapegoated in a way that they took responsibility for something that they didn't do. So there's a third of the people that are really happy that things have changed, and they're going to speak up, because I get phone calls all the time about, I was railroaded on this charge, and Alex favored a co-plaintiff over me. I had the bigger injuries, the more damages,
mm-hmm.
and yet he got more money for this person because, that was the main client. Or, I was what happens in a lot of these auto wrecks is Alex would take the main plaintiff and then give other plaintiffs to other lawyers. And, like 80% of the money would go to Alex's plaintiff, and only 20% would be spread around on the other people in the car.
Okay.
So you have all these different factions that some want change, some want to stay the same, some are fearful.
Mm-hmm.
But the people, it's only about 2,500 people in that county, the same 2,500 people that existed for the last 40 years. People die off, they move, but the number never grows.
Sure.
So a rumor or information does travel through that county. And we absolutely believe that people have heard what may have happened to Stephen that's completely different than what the what is being told, that he was just hit by a car and people left. So that's kind of the situation that we have there.
Sure.
In Hampton County.
A situation where it sounds like people would rather, they recognize, yes, something certainly happened here, but we already have all this negative attention on us. we don't want to keep adding more, essentially. Is that kind of the gist or part of the equation?
Very fair.
Okay.
Very fair way of looking at it. They also, the reason that Stephen's death was solved so quickly in 2015, he's low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
He's not Alex Murdaugh. He's not a Paul Murdaugh. He's not Mallory Beach. He was just a nice young 19-year-old kid that was going to nursing technical school. And it was real easy for them to say, well, he was found in the middle of the road, hit by a car, hit and run. Let's close it up. We've determined how he was the cause of his death. Mm-hmm. But instead, they didn't want to really ask the hard questions. Okay, let's look at him. Like, who would want to kill him? No, his shoes weren't blown off. Yeah. No, he had no visible injuries that would indicate he was hit by a bumper of a car or a fender or an open car door. There was no broken hip. Yes, he had a little bit of road rash, but that could have been, him dragged on the ground, or if somebody had a baseball bat and they swung it from the back of a pickup truck, it hit him in his head. And, then he fell on the ground and slid a couple feet. Those would have been harder questions to ask. Yeah. And, Sandy Smith wanted answers. She felt that the conclusions were reached too quickly. She got no answers. We were asked to come on board in March of this year, and our charge was to get Stephen exhumed, get a second autopsy, and see if people were going to ask the hard questions. In 2021, the Highway Department transferred the file because they had it for 6 years, transferred the file in the investigation to SLED. Unfortunately, they released all of the file at that time, which really caused any momentum that they were having or could have to stop dead in its tracks, because then whoever had knowledge would start reading what was being reported in the investigative file and see people's names be named. And nobody wants to see their name in the paper. Sure. So that kind of chilled it for a little bit. That really irked Chief Keel that the Highway Department chose to release the file. They shouldn't have, because it was an ongoing investigation. And I think it compromised some of the timing of the investigation. I don't think it's going to chill the overall conclusions that can be reached. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to have an explanation on Stephen's death. I don't know who's going to be charged. I don't know if there's going to be charges, but I firmly believe that SLED wants a conclusion. The Attorney General wants a conclusion. And when I say Attorney General, I say Alan Wilson, because they're both riding on a high right now. The SLED looks great. They did, their investigation resulted in a conviction. It was done in a way that was civil. You saw the best of how a trial works. You saw a trial judge and Judge Newman that was not like an O.J. Simpson, Lance Ito type of judge. He stayed in the background. He was measured. He moved it along. You saw total civility outside the courtroom, no riots, there were a lot of pro-Alex people, a lot of anti-Alex people. Everybody got along. Everybody ate lunch. There were no fighting when the verdict came. There was no rioting. There weren't curfews, no burning of cars. You saw how justice works, and it's a pretty thing when it works. And so I think SLED feels like they're riding a high. Alan Wilson is riding a high. He took a lot of criticism, from me included, on why he chose to go with the murder trial first before all the financial crimes, even though he charged Alex with all these financial crimes through 2021 and early 22. And he's going to run for governor. So I think SLED's riding a high, the AG's riding a high, the Attorney General's office is riding a high. And if they could solve the Stephen Smith case, and they believe it was not a hit and run, they believe it was a homicide, and I was authorized to disclose that when I was retained in March by Chief Keel. if they can get an explanation and an accountability for Stephen's death, they look like superstars.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
with Tony Brueski.